Welcome to the KRCG 13 Bracket Challenge. I'm Rod Smith along with Josh Kurlak. We'll bring in Tony Mullen in just a few moments. This is NCAA Tournament Week. We want to help you out. Josh, you got your bracket filled out?
I did. I stayed up into the wee hours of last night and a little bit of work this morning and got it all done.
Well, you are a wealth of knowledge. We've talked a lot of college basketball, and do you have any good tips for those viewers who may have not turned in their brackets yet or just starting out? Give us a little bit of what helps you.
Right. I think the biggest rounds, Sweet 16, and then the Final Four, and then if you can get the champion, great. The upsets are fine, especially with the double-digit seeded teams. A lot of times those teams don't advance past the first round and second round into the Sweet 16. So just don't get too overwhelmed and try to get as many Sweet 16 teams as you can and go from there.
I think that's great. And I usually work myself backwards from a champion, then Final Four, and then kind of see how they would get there. And like you said, don't get too upset if you miss a few of the early ones. There will be upsets.
Yes.
You're not going to pick them all. And you don't want to pick them all because they're not all going to be upsets. But don't be too upset after that first weekend. So many people get to bother with that. But like you said, if you got your Sweet 16 teams in there, you're in pretty good shape.
Correct.
I think 17 of the last 25 national champions were #1 seeds.
I think we've got a good chance to see that again this year. A lot of the teams maybe that were in that 4 to 7 range of seeding-wise, not as strong as they have been in past years.
All right, well, no Missouri Tigers this year, at least not for the men. The women are in, but 68 teams are in the field. We'll go through the first-round matchups and then talk Final Four and champion. Josh, let's start with the East Regional. That's on the upper left of your bracket if you're looking at that. The #1 seed, the defending national champion, Villanova, Big East champions, 31-3. They will play the winner of the play-in game, Mount St. Mary's and New Orleans.
I'll take New Orleans in that. I saw they're getting 2 points over Mount St. Mary's if you want to or have to pick that game. And then obviously a 16 has never beaten a 1 seed in the NCAA tournament. I don't think it'll happen here. I like Villanova moving on to the second round.
I think that's a pretty safe pick. Then the 8-9 seeds. And if you've been around the tournament for a while, you know these games really can go either way. And again, you're not going to lose if you get them all right or wrong or whatever. But Wisconsin, Virginia Tech, the Hokies, who do you like there?
I flip-flopped on this one. Virginia Tech really likes to get out and run. They've got 5 guys who average double figures in points per game, but Wisconsin has been to the Sweet 16 the last 2 years. We've got some returning starters from those teams. I'm picking the Badgers.
Josh, we go to the 5-12 matchup. Always interesting in the brackets because year after year we see 12s win. Just which ones? You got to pick the right ones. Virginia is the 5 seed. North Carolina, Wilmington, the Seahawks at 12 seed. Do you like this 12?
I do. This is one of my favorite upset picks of the bracket. I think UNC Wilmington can get out and score with the best of anybody in the country. They're top 10 in points per game. Virginia does not. They're in the 300s for points per game. They do play very good defense, best defense in the nation, but you got to score to win in the tournament. I like UNC Wilmington in this game.
Going with the upset, going with offense. How about the 4 seed, Florida from the SEC, taking on East Tennessee State, a 13 seed. The Buccaneers, 27-7 Southern League champions. And Josh, it's not often we see a 13 seed win, but I've heard a lot of people talking about this might be one.
I'm taking the Gators for that exact reason. I think Florida will be on upset alert. They'll come in prepared, ready for East Tennessee State. And East Tennessee State has not seen a team like Florida all year long. I think the Gators move on.
All right, go with Florida. #6 seed, the SMU Mustangs, 30-4. They had some NCAA sanctions last year, so they didn't get to play. This year they get Providence or USC. The winner of that game will get SMU.
I'm taking USC in that play-in game. Too many athletes for Providence. I like the Trojans, but when they have to play SMU has a young man by the name of Semi Ojeleye. He's expected to be drafted in the NBA draft this summer. 6'7", he can shoot from 3, 40%. He's got arms the size of tree trunks. I don't think USC will be able to stop him.
One of the better names in college basketball.
Exactly. I envy the announcers of this game. They get to say Ojeleye over and over again.
There you go. The #3 seed in this east side is Baylor. The Bears from Big 12 taking on the 14 seed New Mexico State, the Aggies.
I'm taking Baylor in this one. When you can run a front line out there with heights of 7 feet, 6'10", and 6'9". I like their chances. New Mexico State has not seen a team with the athleticism and size of Baylor. I think Scott Drew and the Bears move on to the second round.
Big team, the Bears are. Number 7, South Carolina in the East, coached by Frank Martin, everybody's favorite. They're 22-10, taking on the 10-seed Marquette. Maybe a mild upset here?
I am going with Marquette. South Carolina lost 6 of their last 9 in the regular season. Not really playing their best basketball as of right now, and Marquette can score. They like to get up and down. South Carolina struggles at times to put the ball in the basket. You got to win in the tournament. You got to score points. I like Marquette in this one.
All right, so a mild upset there. Number 2, Duke. I have a feeling you're not picking the upset here over Troy, the 15-seed Duke. Fresh off the ACC Tournament Championship. They're healthy now, 27-8, and really playing about as well as anybody in the country right now.
Right, Duke looks just as good as advertised at the beginning of the season. They're finally putting everything together. It certainly helps when you have a Hall of Fame coach on the sideline as well. I'm taking the Blue Devils in this one easily.
All right, Josh, we're going to give you your pick for the East and also a sleeper pick. If you're not picking your number 1 pick, who would you think that somebody might want to pick?
I like Duke in this. Despite Villanova, defending national champions, being in this region, I think Duke is playing well at the right time. I'm picking the Blue Devils to advance to the Final Four, but I will say this. If Baylor can knock down some shots, the Bears can make some noise in this region, get past Duke, and then once you get to the Elite Eight, it's a 40-minute game. Anything can happen there.
All right, so you're taking the 2-seed Duke, but you think Baylor has a shot, and if you're out there and you don't want to be just like everybody else picking Duke or the number 1 seed in this region, Villanova, who a lot of people will take, you might think about Baylor, is what you're saying.
Not bad choice.
Okay, let's go to the West. That's on the lower part on the left-hand side of your bracket, and that has the number 1 seed Gonzaga, 32-1. They are the champions from the West Conference, and JW3, Jonathan Williams III, former Missouri Tiger, 10 points and 6.5 rebounds a game. They're playing the South Dakota State Jackrabbits, the 16 seed again. You mentioned doesn't happen often, never has happened that a 16 is won.
Right, and I don't think it happens here. And boy, would Missouri fans love to still have Jonathan Williams III still around. But I'm taking the Bulldogs. I think there's just obviously going to be too much for South Dakota State. And they're the analytical college basketball darlings. All the computers love them, but I think part of that was masked from strength of schedule. But not going to be a problem here. They're moving on.
I remember in the old days, Gonzaga was your Cinderella story. No longer. They are a powerhouse,
right.
And they are legitimate. It's a number 1 seed this year. How about this is one of the best stories in college basketball this year. I grew up in Chicago. I watched Northwestern play. They were lousy forever. Took them 78 years. They finally made it into the NCAA tournament. Chris Collins, the old Duke assistant, 23-11 with Northwestern. They are an 8 seed. They will take on Vanderbilt, an SEC team, which, by the way, lost to Missouri by 20 points. Bryce Drew and company, 19-15. That's a lot of losses for Vandy.
A loss to Mizzou almost should put you out of the tournament.
But I think so.
Vanderbilt is in, and I worry about Northwestern. Can they get past that feeling of happy to be here and move on to we want to win? I think Vanderbilt's playing well at the right time, and I like the Commodores to inch by Northwestern.
Moving on in the West region, we've got Notre Dame, the ACC championship. They made it to the championship game, lost to Duke, but they're 25-9, playing some good basketball. Taking on Princeton, the Ivy League champions who like to slow things down.
I think this should be an SAT contest and not a basketball game, but they will play basketball. As you said, Princeton likes to play slow, but Notre Dame can play slow as well. They might be able to out-Princeton there. The Irish avoid the 12-5 upset. They move on to the second round.
West Virginia, the 4 seed, Bob Huggins, head coach. A lot of people familiar with him. They take on number 13, Bucknell, the Bison, the Patriot League champions. Any upset there, Josh?
I don't think so. I think West Virginia, the way they play defensively, in your face, pressure style defense all game long, will be too much for Bucknell. You cannot simulate that in practice. You can watch all the film you want. You can put 7 guys on the practice court against 5. I don't think it's going to matter. West Virginia gets to the second round.
They're well tested in that Big 12 too. Maryland Terrapins, the 6 seed, Mark Turgeon, a former Big 12 coach, now at Maryland, playing number 11 Xavier. The Musketeers have certainly made some noise in the tournament over the years.
This was an interesting matchup. Wanted to pick Xavier. I think I'm going to go with Maryland, though. Xavier is missing its second leading scorer, Endon Sumner. The Musketeers really haven't been the same since he's been out. They struggled down the stretch. Maryland has a guy by the name of Melo Trimble who's expected to be an NBA player next year. He'll go in the draft this summer. I think that's too much for Xavier to overcome.
The number 3 seed is Florida State taking on Florida Gulf Coast. The Eagles are the 14 seed. They made it to the Sweet 16 a couple years ago.
They did, but not this year. People like to jump on that bandwagon. They've been there before. They could do it again. I don't think so. I think Florida State will win the battle of the state of Florida there. But if you like dunks, be sure to tune into this game. Of course, Gulf Coast got the Dunk City nickname when they made that run to the Sweet 16. And Florida State plays about 12 guys, and they're all about 6'7" to 6'9", or even taller than that, and they can all dunk pretty well.
All right, big dunks there. How about number 7 in the West Regional? St. Mary's out of California against the 10-seed VCU. A lot of folks who watched the tournament over the years remember Shaka Smart. VCU also made some strides in the tournament in years past.
And this VCU team will look very similar to those Shaka Smart teams. They love to press, get in your face defensively, but St. Mary's, I think, will be able to take care of the ball. They only turn it over 11 times per game, and VCU cannot score to keep up with St. Mary's.
Josh, the last one in this bracket, Arizona, the 2 seed, 30-4 Pac-12 champions versus the Fighting Hawks from North Dakota, the 15 seed. Your pick there.
Arizona, talk about a team who's happy to be there. I think North Dakota will just be happy to be there, but I'll take Arizona in that one. They're playing just about as well as anybody in the nation, too.
So that is the West region. Josh, your pick to win it all in the West.
I'm taking Arizona. I think they're playing their best basketball as of right now. Raleigh Markkanen provides a lot of mismatch problems for other teams. 7 feet tall, can score from the perimeter, he can score inside. You want to be playing your best basketball this time of year, Arizona is doing that.
And if you didn't pick Arizona, who would somebody pick that would be a little bit off the beaten track that might be a good upset pick in that region?
I like Notre Dame. I think I was really impressed with them in the ACC tournament. They proved that they can play with anybody. They took Duke down to the wire in that championship game. I've got them actually knocking off Gonzaga in the Sweet 16.
All right, they are a 5 seed. So you've got Arizona and Duke, 2 seeds. We're going to bring Tony Mullen in to talk about the other regions, but who would you pick to round out your Final Four?
In the Midwest, I think Kansas.
Going out on a limb there.
Yeah.
How'd Kansas do in that Big 12 tournament?
They lost to TCU at the quarterfinal, but I might add that they were missing one of the best players in college basketball. Josh Jackson was suspended for that game, so he'll be back.
Extra rest.
Right, exactly. That's how Bill Self will try to spin things there. But I like Kansas to get out of that region. I thought they really lucked out with Louisville as a 2 seed in that particular region. And then in the South, North Carolina. So it sets up Roy Williams versus his old school.
Oh, that's
North Carolina and Kansas in the Final Four for the second time.
Yeah, again. So who you got winning that, and who wins it all?
I think North Carolina will get past Kansas. 3rd time's the charm for Roy Williams. I like Arizona over Duke. I think Raleigh Markkanen just could be the most important player in this tournament, but not quite enough. North Carolina, too many weapons. I think they edge Arizona in a close national title game.
All right, thanks, Josh, for all the wisdom. I hope you caught all that. If not, play it back. Josh has done well in the brackets over the years. So take that advice, and let's bring in Tony Mullen for the other 2 sides of the brackets. Tony, you've been with us for almost 15 years. You've
15
been through
years.
15 brackets,
That's right.
And I think you've won several pools along the way, if I'm not mistaken.
You're mistaken. But that's okay. If you want to tell people that, I'll go along with that. That's
I know
fine.
You're always competitive, and you know what's going on here, so I expect people to be taking notes on this one.
I hope so. It's just basically taking your best guess. That's all it is. I mean, you got to pick certain upsets here and there, but, you know.
You like 1, 2s, and 3s, or sometimes you like those 12s too, don't you?
You got to like the 12s. Every once in a while, the 12s make a run. Sometimes the 10s make a run. Syracuse was a 10 last year and went to the Final Four. So, you know what?
You have picked some upsets over the years. You have done really well picking some upsets.
I know a few years ago when Butler made it all the way to the national championship game, I believe I had them in the Final Four that year.
And I don't think anybody else did. That was a little bit.
That was a team that had come in on the longest winning streak in the country and was playing well. I thought they were a little bit underranked, and sure enough, they almost won that. They lost by 1 or 2 points to Duke that year in the championship game.
Yeah. So you got them again this year in the Final Four.
I've got no, not quite that far, but I think they make a little mini run. We'll see.
All right. Let's start with the Midwest region. That's on the upper right part of your bracket if you're watching at home. And why not start with Kansas?
Of course. Why not?
28 straight appearances in the big dance. That breaks North Carolina's record. So we'll give them that. And then we'll give them one of these two teams, North Carolina Central, who we know, don't we, Tony? That's a team that beat Missouri this year. And UC Davis, I don't know much about them, but first, who you got in that play-in game there?
I really hope North Carolina Central wins, because wouldn't it be nice around Columbia, Missouri to watch people see Kansas and North Carolina Central? You thought that loss to North Carolina Central was bad? I got news for you. Look at the RPIs of North Carolina Central and Missouri. If Missouri had won that game, that would have been a bad loss for North Carolina Central. Let that sink in a little bit.
That's hard to believe. Well, once Kansas gets one of those two, who you like in that one, Tony, knowing that number one has never lost?
Number one has never lost.
So you
never lost to a 16. Kansas is prone to upsets. They are prone to upsets in the first round. So you know what? I'll take Kansas.
All right, thank you.
Maybe another year.
Yeah, there you go. All right, this one a lot more competitive. Miami, the 8 seed against Michigan State, a 9 seed. Boy, Tom Izzo always plays well in March, doesn't he?
They always do, well, except for last year when they were a 2 seed and they lost.
I forgot about last year.
But they always make it. They were 19-14 as an at-large team. Some of these teams, I tell you what, this was not a very good bubble this year because some of these teams not that great. Coin flip game. Let's go Michigan State. They've been in the big dance. They're, as you mentioned, Tom Izzo, he's been in this before. So let's give them one victory in the tournament this year.
Okay, and Tony, how about the 5 seed Iowa State, Big 12 tournament champions? They really played well in Kansas City this past weekend against the Nevada Wolfpack, the 12 seed. You know, there are 5 and 12 upsets. Do you see one here?
I don't think it'll happen here, but I've got another one, I think, later on. These 5-12 games, very competitive over the last 5 years. In fact, the 12 seeds are 10-10.
That's
against
amazing.
the 5 seeds. It's the same with the 11 seeds and the 6 seeds, believe it or not. So you got to find some upsets in there. If you want to pick a good bracket, you got to find the right one. Nevada, the Mountain West champions. Good year, but Iowa State playing very well. Had a great run in Kansas City. I'll take the Cyclones.
Next up, the 4 seed, the Purdue Boilermakers. Matt Painter's team taking on Vermont, the Catamounts, 30-5.
The Catamounts, they have won 21 in a row, which is the longest winning streak in the country. They were one of only 2 teams this year to go unbeaten in their conference in the regular season and winning the tournament. Princeton was the other one.
Okay. So who do you have winning this one?
I'm going upset.
Okay.
I'm going Vermont. We've seen Purdue in this situation before. They folded under pressure in situations like this. This was the Big Ten regular season champion, only getting a 4 seed. Kind of an interesting year for the Big Ten. Well, let's go upset. Let's go Vermont.
All right, Vermont, you heard it from Tony first. How about Creighton, the Blue Jays, a 6 seed taking on Rhode Island, the Rams, who haven't been in the tournament, I don't think, since 1999 was the last time. And I've heard a lot of people talking Rhode Island up. They think this is the year they could pull off an upset
I think they might. This was a team that actually started the year in the top 25. I think they went through some injury issues. So really an 11 seed, maybe at the beginning of the year, that's something that maybe they thought would be a little bit better. But I think there's another upset here. Here's something, I'm going to say it. We haven't said it a lot in the last decade in the state of Missouri. I like the Rams to win a game. Rhode Island takes it.
There you go. Yeah. That's great news. Write that one down, folks, when you're filling out your bracket.
There you have it.
How about number 3, Oregon? Pac-12 taking on the Iona Gales, the 14 seed, a 3-14 there, Tony.
And this is a game, too. When you look at the brackets over the last several years, I don't think it'll happen here, but look at those 14 and 15 seeds. On average, over the last 10 years, there's been about 1 team per year on either that 14 or that 15 line that has won a game in the NCAA tournament. You can ask Missouri and Norfolk State about that. You might want to ask Missouri fans about that. Ouch. Oregon down one of its key players. Its big man is out. I think first round, though, I think they get past Iona and they move on to round number 2.
Okay. And Tony, taking a break here from this regional, just tips for the average viewer on filling out your bracket. You got any good tips, things to think about?
You always want to look for some upsets. You don't want to always go, as we say in the business, chalk, which means the top seed wins every single game. It looks good, obviously, when you're looking at some of these, to just pick the team that you think would be favored in every game, but you got to look for some upsets. Some things to keep in mind, too, those number 1 seeds. People like to fall in love with those number 1 seeds. In 2000, I believe it was 9, either 2008 or 2009, all 4 number 1 seeds made the Final Four. And that was the year, I believe it was Kansas that beat Memphis in the national championship game. Since that time, in the last, I believe it's 7 or 8 years, Only once in that time have multiple number 1 seeds made the Final Four. Multiple.
Seriously?
Number 1 seeds. Last year, all 4 of them made the Elite Eight, but North Carolina was the only one that made the Final Four. So always, look around. Look at some of these teams. There's really good competition, and sometimes just take a guess. Just throw a dart at a board, maybe, because you never know. And that's the thing about this tournament. That's what makes it so much fun. This is one game between 2 teams, and you never know who's going to win. Take Missouri and Norfolk State, for instance. Was Norfolk State really better than Missouri 5 years ago? They weren't a better team. But here's the thing. Norfolk State, I looked it up, they shot about 31% on the season from three-point range. They shot 53% from three-point range against Missouri.
It's one game.
And that's that's one game. That's all you need. So
there you go.
There you have it.
Back on track, Michigan has certainly played well. They had the plane incidents. They almost didn't go to the tournament for the Big Ten, but they won 4 games in 4 days, the Big Ten champions. They will take on number 10, a 10 seed, Oklahoma State from the Big 12.
If you can survive that, my goodness, to win 4 games. And they flew into Washington, D.C. on the morning of their first game.
Yeah.
Played in their practice jerseys the first day because their uniforms were still stuck on the plane. Michigan's playing well. In honor of our good man TJ Fensky, who used to work here, I'll take the Wolverines in round 1. Oklahoma State's had a nice year, but I like Michigan.
Good pick there. How about the 2 seed Louisville, Rick Pitino and company? They will be taking on Jacksonville State, the Ohio Valley champions. First time they've ever been in the tournament. I'm guessing they may not be there all that long, Tony.
Louisville.
You got Louisville easily.
Louisville.
Okay, no doubt about that one.
Yeah.
All right,
there you go.
So Midwest bracket, give us your champion from the Midwest. Who's going to pull? Who's going to come out of this region?
I'm going to go with Kansas. I'll take the Jayhawks. Their road's not the easiest. Of course, none of these 1 seeds have an easy road for sure. Possible matchup in the Sweet 16 with Iowa State, Big 12 game. Wouldn't that be a lot of fun? Teams that have seen each other a couple times this year. Oregon doesn't worry me a whole lot with some injury issues there. I think Louisville could make a run also, but in the end, I think the Jayhawks take it.
And if you didn't pick the Jayhawks and somebody out there wants to pick somebody other than KU, which I think most people probably do.
Of course they do.
Who would you pick? And not just saying the number 2 or 3 seed, but is there somebody else that's really interesting to you that maybe they could make a run here?
I think Iowa State could.
Okay.
I think the Cyclones could. I don't think, Nevada in the first round, either Purdue or Vermont in the second round. They've seen KU before, so, they're familiar with them. It wouldn't be surprising to me, really, if Iowa State beat Kansas in the Sweet 16, but assuming Kansas doesn't lose to NC Central in the first round. But I think Iowa State, Rhode Island, I don't think their Final Four good, maybe Sweet 16 good. But I would go, my pick is Kansas, but wouldn't surprise me. Iowa State would be my sleeper
Cyclones, would love to see it. I was born in Ames, little known fact.
There you go.
Yeah, Dad went to Iowa State. I've been pulling for them for my whole life. They always disappoint. But maybe this is
not the only team you've always pulled for that's disappointed
right.
until recently.
Missouri. Yeah. All right, number 1 seed. This one, we are in which region now?
We're in the South now.
North Carolina, the ACC regular season champions. Roy Williams and company starting with Texas Southern, a 16 seed. I assume you want the Tar Heels here.
I'll take the Tar Heels here. I know this was the most debated number 1 seed. Should North Carolina get it? I know a lot of people were clamoring for Duke to get it, but North Carolina, we saw the committee this year put a lot of weight on winning your regular season conference championship. North Carolina easily in round 1.
Next game in that region we're going to talk about, Arkansas, the 8th seed against Seton Hall. Mike Anderson, the former Missouri Tiger coaching Arkansas, and that's a team, by the way, that Missouri did beat this year.
Missouri beat 2 teams in the SEC this year. 2 of them, Arkansas and Vanderbilt, they both got in the tournament. Go figure. I don't understand how some of this works sometimes. Arkansas has had a nice year. We'll take Mike Anderson's team to advance. Probably lose to North Carolina the next game, but we'll give them round 1 over Seton Hall.
All right, we're talking about a 5-12 matchup, and as Tony mentioned earlier, you said it's been even over the last several years.
It's been even the last 5 years. Yeah, the 12s have beaten the 5s, and the 11s have beaten the 6s. They're 10-10 against each other, and this is another one right here. Minnesota, Middle Tennessee State. Middle Tennessee State won Conference USA 30 wins this season. Here's a little-known fact. If you go to CBS Sports page and you want to look at the RPI rankings, if you click on the list of teams, Minnesota and Middle Tennessee State are right next to each other alphabetically.
Really? How about that?
That has nothing to do with basketball, but it's just a fun little fact. Middle Tennessee's played very good basketball, I believe 20-1 in their last 21 games. Don't have a whole lot of what looks like to be impressive victories, but they've won a lot of games this year. and I'm going to give them the upset over Minnesota in the first round.
Middle Tennessee State, you heard it here, and I think other people are picking them too, so a very possible upset there. How about the number 4 seed Butler, the Bulldogs, a team you picked a few years ago?
Right.
I think they've beaten Villanova twice this year.
Yes.
They're playing Winthrop, a 13 seed. Do you like the Bulldogs?
I do. Winthrop is a team out there that's getting some love from the experts as a 13 seed, as a possible upset over Butler. But again, as you mentioned, Butler did sweep Villanova in the regular season series. They also beat Arizona this season. That was well back in November, so it's been a while, but wow. Butler has some impressive victories on the resume this year. Butler over Winthrop in round 1.
6-11 matchup. Kansas State, Wake Forest first have to play in a game before they get to play Cincinnati. Who do you like there, Kansas State or Wake Forest?
Oh.
Or do you care?
I really don't.
Cincinnati.
I'm taking Cincinnati. I will take Cincinnati. It's not been uncommon for these teams, these 11, 12 seeds that are in the first 4 games, to advance and win at least 1 game, maybe even 2 games in the big dance once you get into the part of the bracket here. I don't see any of these teams that really inspire a lot of confidence this year, though, to be quite honest. So just for the heck of it, for all the Big 12 folks, let's give Kansas State the victory over Wake Forest, but I still take Cincinnati in round 1.
To move on. UCLA, the Bruins, Steve Alford's team, 28 regular season wins this year. That's a record at UCLA with their incredible past. That's an incredible record. However, they didn't used to play quite as many games back in the John Wooden days.
That's a lot of games.
Yeah, really good. And I've heard a lot of people talking UCLA up big heading into this tournament. They start with Kent State, the 14 seed.
UCLA is a look at this South region, too. I mean, you talk about tradition. North Carolina's the 1 seed. Kentucky is 2. UCLA is 3. When we talk about, UCLA, I think, any of these Pac-12 teams, Arizona's got a good shot to make the Final Four. UCLA has a shot. I think Oregon, maybe not as much now with some injury issues, but UCLA is a team that I think could possibly make a deep run in this tournament. They win the first game handily.
Very good. How about Dayton? The Flyers, the 7th seed against Wichita State, a 10 seed. Very few people really think that's where they should be. Wichita State is ranked much higher than that in a lot of polls. 30-4, and the Shockers have played really well the last several years. Kind of surprised they're a 10.
That was very surprising. There is one metric out there, kind of those advanced metrics, but one set of rankings has Wichita State in the top 10 in the country.
That's amazing.
As far as 10 seed, and they're a 10 seed. That to me is they should be 7-6 in my opinion. Maybe even 5 might be pushing it, but they shouldn't be a 10 seed. They'll beat Dayton in round 1. I think they pull up. Dayton's had a good year, won the Atlantic 10 regular season championship. Wichita State, though, in round 1.
No shocker there if they win. Kentucky, it would be a shock if they lose to Northern Kentucky, taking their first trip to the NCAA tournament. SEC, of course, champions of Kentucky, both the regular season and the tournament champs.
Kentucky wins this game, but I'll tell you what, Northern Kentucky is going to be fired up. This is Northern Kentucky getting to play the big school in the state. So they'll be ready to go. But yeah, Kentucky wins this game. I think Kentucky probably advances to the Sweet 16 too, but again, you're probably going to run into Wichita State, and that's where, Wichita State didn't get a great seed. It might end up being okay for them. It might end up being good for teams like Kentucky because you can play a team like Wichita State in the second round.
That doesn't seem right, does it?
That really doesn't seem right. Kentucky in round 1, though, no problem.
All right, so the South. We went through the region, Tony. Who you have coming out of the South? Who wins it?
Very competitive region. I think when they're playing their best, North Carolina is extremely tough to beat. I will take the Tar Heels a little bit over UCLA. I think UCLA gets past Kentucky, and then that's going to be a heck of a game in the regional final. I'll take North Carolina, though.
And the advice you gave us earlier, don't pick all the number 1 seeds, right?
Don't pick all the number 1 seeds.
And you picked?
I've picked the 2 number 1 seeds so far.
Okay.
At least one of them will probably go to the Final Four, so that's okay.
You're probably right.
I'm not saying stay away from them completely, but...
And if you didn't pick North Carolina, is there an upset possible? You talk about Wichita State. That's crazy to think they could get past all those other teams. But
it is.
Anybody else you pick in that field in case you don't want to go with the number 1 seed?
You can go with Kentucky.
Yeah.
The 2 seed. UCLA is the 3 seed. I know I'm not picking anybody that would really shock anybody, but really outside of those 3 teams, I don't see anybody. Butler's a good team. Cincinnati's had a decent year. Wichita State's a good team, but I think I'd be surprised if any of those top 3 did not come out of this region.
Yeah, loaded on the top of that
Yes.
region. So you got those 2, and then if
Yes.
Josh Kurlak told us who was going to be the other 2 on the other side of the bracket, who would you have there for your
This is
Final Four?
actually Josh's bracket that I stole just to look at, but it's funny because he's got Kansas up here and North Carolina here, just like I do. And I think I'm leaning the same way that he is on the other side of the bracket. I think Arizona wins the West. I think they will beat Gonzaga in the regional final.
Okay.
I know Josh didn't agree with that, and then I am leaning toward Duke in the East over Villanova. That's a really, really tough one, though.
Okay, so
that's
you got a couple
toughest.
2 seeds on that side.
I
then.
think I have 2 number 1 seeds and 2 number 2 seeds.
Okay, I think that's exactly what Josh had too. So then your winners, and who's going to win it all, Tony?
I will take Duke over Kansas in a championship game.
Duke over Kansas.
Duke over KU.
All right, some real tradition there.
Assuming that Kansas gets past North Carolina Central.
Yeah.
Look out.
I would put a little bit on that one, perhaps. Yeah. Well, enjoy the tournament. March Madness is here, the big dance, and we'll have highlights for you. We'll have a lot of the coverage here on KRCG TV. And if you missed this, just replay it because Tony's full of knowledge, and so is Josh. and we'll check them out next week and see,
we'll see how
how
we're
many of
doing by
those
then,
teams made it to the Sweet 16. Thanks for watching. Enjoy the tournament.